Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I want to look at the weekend of April the 26th and 27th, 2025. And there are two big events this weekend. We have got a new moon and we've also got Mars opposition Pluto. And these aspects happen quite close together. So they're impact may kind of merge into each other, as I will be discussing later in the video. I also want to look at India and Pakistan because we've just had this terrorist attack in which 27, 28 Indian tourists were killed in Kashmir, and I think even two of the terrorists were Pakistani nationals, and this has caused a real sort of collapse in India-Pakistan relations. That should concern all of us. We shouldn't forget that India and Pakistan both have nuclear weapons, and I think also this new moon and the Mars-Pluto opposition does have an impact on these two countries, and that is something I will be looking at. But I'm not just focusing on India and Pakistan in this video. I just want to look at the Mars-Pluto opposition, look at the new moon, look at a few famous people who might be influenced by these events. But before I do that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for the weekend of April the 26th and 27th. By the way, if you do enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, feel free to subscribe because it does make a big difference to the channel. So let's see what's happening this weekend. So you can see that I've put Venus conjunct Saturn there. I don't know why there's a Venus conjunct Saturn there, but Venus conjunct Saturn is still very much there, but I don't want to make a big deal about it, so I will remove it. There you go, it's gone. So you can see in this chart that at midnight, the middle of the weekend, the moon is in very late Aries. It's at 27:55 Aries. So we might say that a Saturday is a moon in Aries day and Sunday is a moon in Taurus day. So to be precise, the moon moves into Taurus London time at 8:17 a.m. on Sunday. So if you are in the Americas or Africa or Europe, then yeah, you can treat Sunday as being a day when the moon is in Taurus, and yeah, Saturday is more about sort of moon in Aries. So that might suggest a change, that on Saturday we are trying to get things together. We're trying to take the initiative. We're trying to make things happen. It's a more fiery day. And then on Sunday, perhaps things will slow down a little. They could slow down a little. Moon is well placed in Taurus. It's exalted there. So we may be able to create a little bit of stability for ourselves. But we mustn't be distracted. If you look at Sunday, the moon does make a square to Pluto and it does make a square to Mars. So, some of us might have to make a real effort to stay out of trouble with that square coming up. So, in fact, Mars opposition Pluto is one of the big events of the day, of Sunday, but in fact it dominates the weekend. So I don't think we should necessarily think, oh, the Mars-Pluto opposition is only on Sunday. It's on Saturday as well. In fact, it sort of kind of dominates the whole period in which we're in. And so Mars and Pluto is an intense combination. It's about power, and it's about power's exercise, and in certain cases it can be about people throwing their weight around. And when the moon moves into Taurus, it makes a T-square. So you've got Mars opposition Pluto with Moon in Taurus on the T. And so there could be moments of real intense drama over the weekend. And we also shouldn't forget that we've got the build up to the new moon. So we are in the waning cycle of the moon. It's all coming to an end. And with the new moon, which is fairly late on Sunday, actually, it's might even be on Monday if you're in Australia or New Zealand. So it's quite a late feature of the weekend, and so that might say something about the weekend. Yes, when the moon moves into Taurus, we get the build up to a new moon, but it's not quite there yet. And so this weekend should perhaps be a time for wrapping things up rather than starting anything new. And so if you're planning on some wonderful new initiative, you might think you want to get going on it, especially when the moon is in Aries through Saturday. But where's it all going? The moon does make a sextile to Jupiter at the beginning of a weekend, but it's a fairly minor aspect, overall. So that moon sextile Jupiter is possibly not enough grounds to be starting anything new. So I think that we need to accept that. And additionally, aside, this Mars-Pluto, additionally we've got Mercury semi-square Uranus. So that's another aspect to consider. So Mercury semi-square Uranus, that can be quite tense as well. Mercury is a communication planet. It's also about our ideas, and some of us might feel a certain tension, that we feel that we have something to say, but how are we going to say it? And that might manifest as sort of nervous actions. So it is a busy weekend. Sunday looks especially busy. Even though Moon is in Taurus, that seems to be a slower sign than Aries, but it's the aspects you have to look at. And the Moon is making the T square with Mars and Uranus, and that really isn't something to be ignored. So that's the view from New York. If we look at the weekend, the middle of the weekend, from the perspective of Sydney, Australia, then middle of the weekend, the moon is at 19 Aries, midnight on Sunday. So that means that the moon is not going to go into Taurus until pretty late on Sunday. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, then you've got moon in Aries throughout the weekend, and possibly it's going to be an easier weekend. The weekend may be dominated by that moon sextile Jupiter, at least late on Saturday into Sunday, beginning of Sunday. That moon sextile Jupiter might make things easier. Certainly Saturday should be a relatively easy and constructive day for you, though don't forget that it is a waning moon. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in Australia, New Zealand, the Americas, the fact that it's a waning moon is something we really do need to consider. And it's the end of something, it's not a beginning, and maybe you should behave accordingly. Then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And from a heliocentric view, Venus continues to be opposition Uranus. And I talked about that on Friday, but that aspect does have an influence. And so Venus opposition Uranus is not an especially stable aspect, and other people might be behaving in an unusual way, and relationships should not always be taken for granted, and we mustn't make assumptions about other people, because they might do things or announce things that we weren't expecting. And additionally, as I said on on Friday with Venus opposition Uranus, some of us might have strange aesthetic and artistic tastes, and we might see things which are disturbing. They might disturb our sense of harmony and our sense of what is tasteful. So that's probably the main aspect, that Venus Uranus opposition. So I think I should just move straight to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of April the 26th and 27th, 2025. Aries. Aries, it's possibly a somewhat divided weekend. On Saturday, you've got the moon moving through Aries, still moving through Aries. Then for most of Sunday, the moon will be in Taurus. Well, unless you're in Australia or New Zealand, in which case it's going to be right at the end of Sunday that the moon moves into Taurus. So on Saturday, you might really feel that there are things that you would like to do, that you like to continue with. In fact, Saturday might feel as if it's a bit of a continuation of Friday. So, you do want to take the initiative, and you want people to be, aware of, what you've got to offer, and you might be, ready to speak your mind. But are you actually going to make much progress? You can have all the enthusiasm you like, but it may just be that the opportunities aren't good enough. So on Saturday, just don't expect too much, and remember that the moon is waning. In fact, it's waning all weekend, and so with a waning moon, especially the waning moon in Aries, it's just about you potentially getting excited about something which in the short term is going to be very difficult to get together. But there are other causes for your excitement, and Mars is making an opposition to Pluto. So Mars and Pluto are exactly 180 degrees apart this weekend, and that is quite a powerful aspect. And this aspect makes you realize that there could be winners and losers, that a lot of things are about power. Who has the power? And if you find you can't get things to get together on Saturday, you might be tempted to blame other people or circumstances, and you might be questioning whether you have what it takes to make things happen, and you might be of the opinion that some people are blocking your progress, and that it has to be a question of power and assertion. And this Mars-Pluto opposition might encourage you to have negative feelings about certain other people. You look at their approach and their attitude, and they just don't seem to be helpful. I mean, it may be worse than that. It could be that you're of the view that some people, are deliberately trying to weaken you, or they're trying to, steal the limelight. So in your social life, Aries, be very careful with that Mars opposition Pluto. You might find yourself in opposition, almost literally, to other people. Could be your friends, for example. I don't think it's about one-to-one relationships. It's more about people in a group, more than one other person, 2, 3, 4 other people, just feeling a little bit oppressed by it. So I don't know what you're planning on doing over the weekend, but if you're going to a party or some other gathering, then maybe you should have second thoughts. Maybe it just won't work out. It could all be rather disappointing. And moving into Sunday, the moon does change sign. Moon moves from Aries to Taurus, and that might sound as if that would release the pressure, but not necessarily, because when the moon moves into Taurus, it makes a square to Mars and it makes a square to Pluto, and that could very well be about further annoyances. And those annoyances, they could be about money. So if money becomes an issue over the weekend, especially on Sunday, be really careful, because it could get out of hand, and it may be a real problem, actually. So financial things should, if at all possible, should be avoided. Now, there is a plus side to the moon moving into Taurus. It may allow you to think about your resources and building up your resources. That ideally, in fact, that's what it should be. And we've got a new moon coming up, and so Sunday's new moon for you, could well be about what you do with money, what your attitude to money is, and realizing that some of your annoyances about money may not be as bad or as pressing as they seem, and it's because you can get a sense of perspective and you can ground things. But try not to blame other people. That's important. And it's not just about money. There is just plenty of opportunity for blaming other people for everything that's going wrong. And if things are slow or have become slow, you might be of the opinion that it's just not your fault. But with the new lunar cycle, which starts on the new moon, we've got a new moon late on Sunday. You have an opportunity to really look at things again, and from a financial perspective, over the next few weeks, you do have a chance to make good progress and to give yourself some stability. Maybe stability is not what you need, but if that is something you've been thinking about, and there have been financial issues that have been sort of up in the air, now might be a good opportunity to bring it all down to earth. Taurus, there is a new moon starting to form, and this new moon is in your sign, and it is something that you should be looking forward to. I mean, new moon in Taurus, you could say, well, that represents a new beginning for Taurus. Plenty of things that you can get going on, and if you want to make a start, now might be the time. But timing is important. On Saturday, the moon is moving through Aries, and so with the moon moving through Aries, it is the run-up to the new moon, but the new moon isn't quite with you, and it is the ending of something. And so, Taurus, you should not be in a rush to make things happen, and you should wait for that new moon to start before making clear commitments, before announcing your intentions, for example. So, Taurus, you don't feel you have to do everything at once. Now, it's not just about the fact that it's a new moon, it's also about the fact that the moon is moving into Taurus, and so when the moon does move into Taurus, it will be early on Sunday if you're in the Americas, pretty early on Sunday if you're in Europe. It's 8:17 a.m. London time that the moon moves into Taurus, and 9:17 a.m. Paris or Berlin time. But that's on Sunday, by the way. And so with the moon moving into Taurus, you are starting to be aware that it's a new beginning, and that does fill you with a certain amount of excitement. But the moon in Taurus does also create a bit of tension, because the moon makes a square to Mars and it makes a square to Pluto. And so, by Sunday, some Taurians may actually feel that the battle lines have all been set out. Where is the battle and the conflict? It might be right in front of you, and something that you're building up to. Now, it's a good idea to not always assume a conflict. Some things can be just done without other people's help, and you shouldn't feel that other people are preventing you from doing whatever it is that you want to do. But you might assume a conflict with that moon square Mars, moon square Pluto, and it could all be very dramatic. And so, Taurus, it's probably best that you take responsibility, that you realize that once the moon is moving into Taurus, once you've got the new moon in Taurus, it is a time when you can make things happen. And in terms of success and failure, that could be all about what you do and don't do, and you don't feel that other people should be blamed, because you are in the center of things, and you should regard yourself as being in the center of things. And don't assume a power struggle if you don't have to. But issues of power are going to matter. I mean, they're going to matter for a lot of the 12 signs. They're going to matter for you because the moon is square Mars, the moon is square Pluto, Mars is opposition Pluto, and sort of by Sunday, you might feel pressure, and it might just feel that something has to happen. And it could be that you have a realization. Realizations are there. I mean, normally one associates realizations with full moons rather than new moons, but I think that this new moon, something might occur to you, and you might see people for what they are. I mean, one aspect we do have, which I haven't really talked about so far, is the sun is making an opposition to true black moon Lilith. And with that sun opposition true black moon Lilith, it's possible, Taurus, that you see the dark side to another person. And once you see that dark side, what do you do and how do you relate to it? Now, just because someone has got a dark side doesn't mean that they should be avoided. After all, we've all got a dark side. We've all got an unpleasantness to us. And you could say that if you realize how another person is unpleasant, it's easier to trust them. If you can see their evil, because you know where it is. We've all got our unpleasantness. I just must emphasize that. And so that could actually be quite liberating. And so if you know how someone is going to be unpleasant, then you can predict their next move. And also you have a better opportunity to understand them. And we mustn't forget the possibility of projection. That sun opposition true black moon Lilith. Sun in Taurus opposition true black moon Lilith in Scorpio. It can mean that you can see your own dark side through the actions of another person. So if you find yourself really resenting someone by the end of a weekend, not just resenting them, but really blaming them and feeling that they're up to no good, turn it round and consider your own responsibility, and also consider, how the very things that you're blaming someone else for are actually part of your own personality. And if you can integrate things, over the weekend on a psychological level and also on a practical level, bringing everything together. But if you can integrate things, then I think that you would be making yourself a lot stronger. Gemini. Gemini, this weekend you are not quite sure what to do or where to go. You're feeling torn, and there could be a real amount of indecision. And you might start the weekend feeling that there are things you want to do, people you want to see, and you're ready to go. And then when it actually comes to the practice, actually making things happen, you might not quite know how to go about it. And it might just be a question of the reality. So you've got an idea about how things should be, but when you actually try to get your teeth into it all, it just doesn't work. You perhaps made assumptions about other people, about places you were going to visit, people you were going to talk to. You made assumptions, and you soon realize that these assumptions may actually be wrong, or you've exaggerated something, or underestimated a problem. So don't necessarily assume that everything is going to come together, because it may not. And you also shouldn't forget about your own mind. Your mind is moving in lots of different directions, and it's also quite inspired because Mercury is making a semi-square to Uranus. Now, this aspect between Mercury and Uranus, it's exact on Sunday. So it's something that creeps up on you as the weekend progresses. And this Mercury semi-square Uranus, it does give you ideas. And it gives you ideas that you weren't expecting. You suddenly see things in a different way, and you realize that things have to change, that previous ideas, previous plans are just not going to work. So that adds to this feeling of indecision and just not being able to actually see anything through. And so maybe you should really accept that and not try to do too much over the course of a weekend. It's a weekend for reflection, and we've got the build up to the new moon, and so this new moon for you, Gemini, is a time when you can be actually quite solitary. Other people are not, strictly speaking, necessary. You can work things out on your own. And if you have ideas, then they're your ideas. And if you were to try to discuss your ideas straight away the moment you have them, then you might be disappointed with a response. And also, Mercury semi-square Uranus is going to make you tense, and other people might pick up on that tension, and this tension could become obvious, and it could make other people nervous as well. So that might be a good reason why you need to keep your distance. And also, if you're keeping your distance, then if you have ideas, then you can work out how to use them, in your own way, without feeling any pressure, and also without embarrassing yourself. As I've just said, if you if you say something the moment you think about it, you're weakening its power. And it's a time, Gemini, when you need to contemplate, and you need to really sort of work out what you're going to do next. And the weekend is just the beginning of something, the first ideas, the first impulse. And so it might not be until next week that you're ready to actually think about, what you're going to do and what you're going to say. Cancer. Cancer, I think it's going to be quite a powerful weekend in its own way. And it might not seem like that. And I think at the beginning of a weekend, Saturday, it just feels that not a great deal is going on. Yeah, you might feel that there are things that have to be done, but it might just be about wrapping things up and seeing things through to a conclusion, but not really having to start anything. And you might even forget the fact that there's a new moon on Sunday. But as Saturday moves into Sunday, as the moon moves into Taurus, things do become more active. And certainly if you are socializing over the weekend, then if you socialize on Saturday, not a great deal's going on. The moon is making a sort of mild sextile to Jupiter. It's all very nice, but it's not spectacular. There's nothing to remember, nothing to write home about. But as you move into Sunday, as the moon moves into Taurus, then things do change. Moon moving into Taurus, in one sense, is really good, because the moon is exalted in Taurus, and the moon is particularly strong at the beginning of Taurus. 3 degrees Taurus is the degree of maximum exaltation. And so in yourself, you are strong, and you have a great sense of who you are and your own power. But the moon is, firstly, it's starting to become new. We have a new moon at the end of Sunday, and so that new moon is obviously an important part of a lunar cycle, when you might want to dedicate yourself to something new. And in terms of your social life, it's an opportunity to consider new friends, to meet new people, and to get closer to new people. And it's not just about the weekend; it's about the next few weeks. As the sun moves into Taurus, it's already in Taurus, but as the sun continues moving through Taurus, it is a time. It's a time of the year actually when Cancerians are more sociable than usual. But that new moon in Taurus really makes it clear. But you can't get on with everyone, and on a Sunday, the moon makes a square to Pluto. It makes a square to Mars. So the moon is on the T of a T square. So we've got Mars opposition Pluto, and the moon is making 90-degree aspects to both those planets, and it's the build up to a new moon. So by Sunday you might feel the pressure, and there could be things that make you angry, small things even, things that you don't normally get annoyed about. And it might be money, people's attitude to money, people perhaps being too petty about money, or holding money back, or, as far as you're concerned, having the wrong attitude to it. And it's not just about money; it could be possession. So that's one aspect of this potential for disagreement on Sunday. So when it comes to money, be careful and probably avoid financial issues unless you are prepared to take them very seriously. You can't trivialize the subject of money, and even relatively small amounts of money could become issues, could become a sticking point. But even if it's not about money, that moon square Mars, square Pluto, could put you under a fair amount of pressure, and you may have to make an extra effort to be seen and heard, and certain people could be hard work. More hard work than expected. So don't take your social life lightly on Sunday. Don't spend time with people or plan to spend time with people just for the sake of it, because certain people just may be a lot more trouble than they're worth. But it could be that you're more trouble than you're worth everything. That's true, but you are the most important person on the planet. But from another person's perspective, you might be more trouble than you're worth. Of course, that's a false perspective. But you may not be an easy person to deal with. And that could be because your irritation is quite close to the surface, and you may not give people an easy time. So do take that into consideration. It's not just about you, it is about other people, and it is also about the kind of impact you're having. So Sunday is a powerful day. You can express your power, and you can make people notice you, but that might not necessarily be desirable. And it's quite possible, Cancer, that you just want a quiet weekend, in which case you should try to sort of stick to what you know and trust, and possibly not take social risks. Leo, you want to be noticed, and you want to be quite prominent this weekend. It's not a weekend where you feel that you really want to be ignored, and that becomes stronger as the weekend continues. I think that on Saturday things are relatively straightforward. The moon is making a sextile to Jupiter, and that moon sextile Jupiter is quite mild. I think that you can sort of enjoy yourself in a low profile kind of way, and you can enjoy people's company, and you might have some interesting ideas, and you can sort of experiment, but in a very sort of gentle kind of way. And also there could be a certain spirituality to Saturday. You want to see beyond things, and you want to be part of something, and that might be reflected, by your dreams, or you might have a dream or an inspiration, and you really want to make it happen, and so you feel that you're in a quite comfortable space, and if you don't try to do anything too dramatic, things should be fine. But things do change when the moon moves into Taurus, because when the moon moves into Taurus, we've got the immediate build up to the new moon, which we've got on Sunday, and also the moon is making a square to Mars, and it's also making a square to Pluto. So the moon is under a lot of pressure with those squares, and so when we look at the overall view of your chart on Sunday, we already know that Mars is moving through Leo, which is your sign, your might be your star sign, your sun sign. It might be your ascendant sign, or it might indeed be your moon sign. So the moon is moon is moving through Leo. Sorry, Mars is moving through Leo. Pluto is moving through Aquarius, and the moon is aspecting both of those planets in Taurus. And so, the moon has a prominent placing here in Taurus, being in a fixed sign, and you're a fixed sign, Leo, and the moon moving towards a new moon, and so you're really feeling that you want something to happen, and this new moon is ambitious, and you're aware of everything that might be stopping you achieving whatever it is that you want to achieve. And so this could potentially make you a difficult person to deal with, because you are ambitious, because you want things done in a particular way, and also you might find that certain people are frustrating. You try to talk about things and it doesn't always work. The words don't necessarily come out right. You try your hardest, but it's just difficult to be understood. And also it might be difficult to understand other people. People are trying to say something, they're trying to communicate their ideas or even their own concerns, but there isn't much of a connection there. So, Leo, maybe it's a time when you shouldn't be worrying too much what other people are doing or thinking and saying, and you have to consider, what you can do. And, in the end, with Moon making a square to Mars in Leo, it might be down to you. So if you want something to happen, really try to be as self-reliant as possible, and don't make the mistake of thinking that other people are your enemy, that outside forces are going to hold you back and are going to mess your life up. It's not like that. If you are as self-sufficient as possible, and if you take responsibility as far as is possible, then I think the weekend can end on a reasonably satisfactory note. And this new moon is just the beginning. It represents a time when you can start work on something. If you begin work over the weekend, it might feel that you're getting nowhere, not least because you're getting very little in the way of outside support. But if you keep going into next week, then I think that things should get easier. And maybe, Leo, you shouldn't take things too seriously, and you shouldn't take what other people say too seriously, and you also shouldn't take their inaction or inertia or lack of enthusiasm too seriously. Just do whatever you can, and also recognize, Leo, that this is an important time for you. It's a time when you really can get a lot together, but I'm not talking about just Sunday. We're talking about the next few weeks, and over the next few weeks, Leo, if you're persistent and you take responsibility, then I think that things won't just be okay. They will actually start to very much move in your favor. Virgo, the moon is starting the week in Aries and it ends the week in Taurus. So that means that how the weekend ends is not necessarily how it starts, and there could be a change over the course of a weekend. So on Saturday, for example, you may not feel that you're especially in the mood for doing anything. I mean, things should be okay, but I don't think that there'll be much in the way of drama, and it may just be a question of enjoying your own company in your own way and having quiet thoughts. But with the moon moving into Taurus, that does create a change. I think it does make you more curious, and you're more interested in what is happening around you, and you might feel that you want to have an impact, that you're ready to show the world what you can do. Now, if you do try to do anything dramatic on Sunday, or indeed Saturday as well, but I think it's more on Sunday, I don't think that you'll quite get the results you're looking for. It feels like you've got the force, you've got the intention, you've got the desire, but actually making it happen may be hard work. And that's because you've perhaps jumped in too early. You've had ideas, you've got thoughts about what you'd like to be doing, but it is a new moon. It's even the run up to the new moon. So the new moon, it might be a new beginning, but it's not a time to be taking action. And any action that you should be involved in should primarily be on a mental level. It's about having ideas, and you can actually have very powerful ideas, and your ideas will be informed by what you see going on around you, the experiences you've had in the past, and also information that you come across. And you might listen to things and you might hear something that sounds exciting and you just want to integrate it. You don't have to act on it. So it's about really building a picture, and it's only at a later stage that you can actually start to put theory into practice. It's not on Sunday, for example. I mean, it is a weekend, but it's also a new moon weekend, and later on you can start to get a sense of what it is that you can do. So don't be in too much of a hurry. That is important, but still be ready to take things seriously. And also, if there's any form of conflict brewing, and I think you might be aware of conflict, it's a kind of conflict that might not necessarily involve you directly, but you can see it brewing. And the way around any conflict is about having ideas, about being able to get a new perspective. And you can get that new perspective perhaps because of a new moon. And that new moon, the moon is going to be square Mars, it's going to be square Pluto. And so that moon is an answer. It's an answer to a problem. The problem is a Mars-Pluto opposition. The answer is the moon. And the answer is the moon in Taurus. It's about seeing things in a different way. And it's a way that's almost revolutionary. And once you see it in a new way, once you are able to reframe the question and reframe the problem, then you start to make progress. And in many cases, Virgos can set themselves up as peacemakers. Not necessarily on Sunday, but over the next few days. And so, if you are witness to a conflict or even party to a conflict, there are things you can actually do to make things better. And you don't have to just accept things as they are and just assume that everything is fated. That is not the case. You have got something useful to offer, but it's just on Sunday you might feel that yeah, you have got something to offer, but no one's listening. But that situation is not going to last forever. Libra. Libra, you feel this weekend that things are in a certain amount of flux. You're not quite sure what's going on or what's happening. On Saturday, you feel that other people can't be ignored. You have to pay them some attention, but is it really worth the effort? People make claims, people make offers, people make promises, but it's quite possible that nothing comes of it. And so don't allow other people to have too much influence on you or to mess up your plans, and don't feel that you have to be super reliable, especially because other people are going to find it difficult for themselves to be reliable. And things have changed now. Venus is now separating from that conjunction to Saturn, and so with Venus now separating from the conjunction, some of the pressure is off, and so things that you used to take really quite seriously, you can be more relaxed about it. So don't feel too much obligation. Now, Sunday is possibly a rather different day than Saturday. The moon changes sign. The moon moves into Taurus. And, with the moon moving into Taurus, there may be things that you start to see differently. You'll realize that it's not about other people. It's actually about you, and there are things that you need to look at again with a different pair of eyes. You need to go deeper. I think that, Libra, in some ways there are things happening that you've only had a superficial glance at, and you think you've got the picture. And now with this new moon in Taurus, you have another look and you see that it is different. It's nothing like that first glance. You start to realize that you're dealing with things which are essentially more complicated and more troublesome. They could be more troublesome, especially if they're ignored. But if you go deeply into things, you start to understand what is happening. And you may actually want to go really deeply into something, because the moon in Taurus, it makes a square to Pluto, it makes a square to Mars, and that might be the encouragement to really understand something. And you have maybe been told things in the past which you had taken for granted. You'd assumed that was the case, and now you see, well, no, it's not really the case at all. You have to you have to work things out from first principles, and all the while Venus is moving closer and closer to Aries. So with Venus moving closer and closer to Aries, Venus is starting to move on to the fixed star Skeet, and that does make you a little bit nervous, those last few degrees of Pisces. And you might be thinking about what could go wrong, and also how larger forces could have an influence on you, forces that you are not responsible for. And we're not just talking about other people here, or the people it's about everything. It's about the planet on which you're living, and you are just becoming aware of those forces and how they could have an impact on you and other people. And you might actually feel a little bit overwhelmed by it all if you give it a lot of thought. And I think you should be giving it a lot of thought. And if you're going to get into something, you can't get into it just a bit. As I said, it is about getting into things in a really deep way. And you have to really get to the bottom of something. And if you can get to the bottom of something, really, really understand it in hyper detail, then that puts you in a great position. You might be the person who ends up understanding things really better than anyone else, and that could give you a distinct advantage. Scorpio. Scorpio, Mars is quite prominent at the moment because Mars is now making an exact opposition to Pluto, and this Mars-Pluto opposition has been getting stronger and stronger, and now it's exact, and Scorpios may be very aware of their own power, what they can do, what they can't do, and some Scorpios are going to want to take action to really maximize this power, to make sure that you really can do everything, that nothing is stopping you. And that is perhaps a good position to be in. You do want to make sure that you are as strong as possible, and there's no doubt that you cut a powerful figure. Though there is a new moon as well this weekend, and this new moon is in Taurus. This new moon makes a square to Mars, so I think that you very much feel it, and it may not be a new moon that you are fully aware of to begin with. It kind of creeps up on you, over the weekend, but by the end of a weekend, when that new moon becomes exact, you start to become aware that something has changed, that a new cycle has started, and it is that kind of time of year, when you've got this with the Taurus new moon, when you do have to start to think about other people and their impact on you. Now, that new moon may indicate that a particular relationship you're in is changing. Perhaps it had been developing in a particular way and you weren't quite sure what was going on, but now with this new moon, it's clear. You can see that there is a relationship which needs to be taken seriously, and I should say that it could be a relationship at any level. I'm not saying it's any particular kind of relationship, but it is important, and it may now be a sort of a new feature of your life. Now, it may be a relationship or a connection with another person that you don't want, but even then you have to consider it and consider its impact on you. And it's a reminder that you're not alone, that outside forces are always going to have an impact on you, for better or for worse. I'm not saying, by the way, that this relationship is good or bad. In itself, it's neutral, but you have to understand what this relationship is about and how you're going to deal with it. And it might just be someone completely new coming into your life. That is a way of looking at the new moon, if we want to be absolutely literal about it. But relationships are never going to be entirely easy because this new moon is square Mars. So when people come into your life, or when people start asserting themselves more than usual, or at least appear to be asserting themselves more than usual, you are quite naturally defensive. Mars represents you. New moon is square Mars, and part of you might want to put people off. Even if they've got something really good to offer, you might not even give people a chance. And that might be a danger this weekend. You might be so concerned with your own power and being in control that people can't get a word in edgeways. You make a decision, and so it's quite possible that someone bearing an opportunity for you put them off. and that might be a shame. Of course, there is a chance that you're able to use your intuition to understand that someone is not bearing in opportunity, someone is a problem and they're no good for you, and you can spot the problem a mile off and you can take evasive action. But I think with this new moon, you have to at least hear people out, see what people have got to say. Because if you reject everyone, then you are going to be missing an opportunity. But none of this should take away from the fact that Mars is now opposition Pluto. It certainly has negative connotations, but it does put you in a position where you are very strong and charismatic and dynamic, and additionally you can be quite innovative. You are going to be an innovator over the next few days. You have new ideas, and these ideas can come from nowhere or appear to come from nowhere, and you see things in a new way, or you make a discovery and it changes everything, and it changes everything for the better. So if you do have an idea, hold on to it, don't lose it, because this idea could be very important. You've been given this idea for a purpose, and if you sort of write it down and you work on it, then you really have a chance to do things differently, and you can be an innovator. So overall, a lot happening this weekend, and new moon, Mars opposition Pluto, and you're full of ideas, and it's just important that you don't take anything too far. And with other people, I think you've got to give people a chance. You mustn't allow people to take liberties, but you've got to give them a chance. Sagittarius, on Saturday, things are relatively straightforward, I think. You've got the moon moving through Aries. The moon is making a sextile aspect to Jupiter. Of course, Jupiter is your ruler. So Saturday, things should actually run pretty smoothly. And I think on Saturday that you have an opportunity to sort of enjoy yourself in a quiet kind of way, and you can be yourself. And additionally, you are quite dynamic if you want to be. As I said on Friday, I mentioned the fact that Jupiter is conjunct the Sun-Mars midpoint. I mean, Jupiter's going to be on the Sun-Mars midpoint all weekend, and it was also on this midpoint on Friday. And so Jupiter on the Sun-Mars midpoint, it gives you a lot of power. Sun and Mars are these dynamic energy, these dynamic energies which you can actually manifest. Though on Saturday, I don't think that you're going to have to throw your weight around. I think that things are relatively straightforward, and you're unlikely to get much resistance. And so do enjoy Saturday. Make the most of whatever's going on, but don't necessarily expect too much. Sunday, things do get a little more complicated because the moon changes sign. It moves into Taurus, and then we have this T-square. The sun is, the moon is making a square to Pluto. It's making a square to Mars, and that could increase the pressure. And that might be when Jupiter on the Sun-Mars midpoint really kicks in. You really want to assert yourself because you feel maybe that you have to. Things aren't as easy, and you want to be in control. You can actually start to see on Sunday how you might lose control, at least from your subjective perspective. And so you have to make that extra effort to get everything together and make sure that no one is disrupting your life. And you can be effective, and you can look after your own space, and you can demand that your routines and your overall efforts are respected. But it is hard work, and there is a danger, Sagittarius, that on Sunday you push things too far, and that might be to do with the Mars opposition Pluto, but it's also the fact that the Moon is square Mars, Moon is square Pluto. You push things too far, and you could end up running out of energy and being quite exhausted. So if you are going to do something on Sunday, consider, when are you going to stop? You can't do it forever, and you can't take things too seriously, because if you do take things too seriously, then you could just go on and on. Remember, that Jupiter conjunct Sun and Mars is hyper energetic, and Sun and Mars together, they can be quite a dangerous pair, because they're so fiery, those energies, even though the Sun is in Taurus and the Mars is in Leo, but only one of those planets is in a fire sign. But it can encourage you to just take things too far, and I don't think that's what you want. So on Sunday, it might be that you should make a special effort to relax, maybe even force yourself to relax. There is a new moon, and a new moon might encourage you to take something in a new direction, but it's only the beginning of a lunar cycle. There's nothing you actually have to do. So on Sunday, do make a special effort to take it easy, and don't feel that you have to exhaust yourself. Oh, and don't shout on Sunday, because with all those planets in Taurus, you're going to, you could do yourself an injury. Taurus is related to the throat, of course, and so on Sunday, your throat might be sort of more vulnerable than usual. So shouting is certainly something that should be avoided. Capricorn, you experience Saturday as probably being a relatively slow day, and I mean slow in the fortunate sense of the word, of slowness. It's good to be slow. You don't want anything to happen. You don't want any excitement, and things can very much happen at your pace. There won't be anything to excite you. I don't think there'll be anything to annoy you, and you can just be yourself in your own way. And you shouldn't worry about any missed opportunities. I don't think there will be any. Now, things do change. The moon moves out of Aries, it moves into Taurus. And so when the moon moves into Taurus, things start to activate. There are more things going on, and there are more things that you would like to be doing. Because the moon moving into Taurus, it moves into a sign that you have a certain sympathy with, because Taurus is an earth sign, and you've already got the sun in Taurus. So we've actually got a new moon in Taurus, and this new moon is the beginning of something, and it might be the beginning of a new way for you to express yourself in a way that is really very much you. I've already sort of mentioned of the sun in Taurus that it can relate to your creativity and doing things that you enjoy doing, and now that you've got a new moon now, that really confirms it. So if there's something that is important to you, then make sure that you give it your best shot. And Sunday is just the beginning. It's just the new moon. You don't necessarily have to do anything on a new moon, but over the next few days, you'll start to have a clearer idea about what you would like to be doing and what you can be happy doing. And other people are going to appreciate this, and if you are true to yourself, then that could improve things in other ways. For example, relationships. Venus is already making a conjunction to Saturn. It's still very close to Saturn, and with that Venus conjunct Saturn, I think that benefits relationships of all kinds. And now that you're able to be yourself, that means that other people can really enjoy your company. And if someone is not right for you and you are yourself, then they're not going to get too close to you. So if you are completely genuine and open, Capricorn, then I really think that's going to help. That's going to make things a lot easier for you. Now, the moon does make a square aspect to Mars and Pluto. And that square to Mars and Pluto probably isn't your problem. It's probably someone else's problem. But it does indicate that there are people out there who are taking themselves seriously, and perhaps taking themselves too seriously, and they might try to impose themselves on you. But you don't have to accept that imposition. It really isn't necessary. So, you should have an idea about what you want to be doing on Sunday, and then you should just do it. And if someone is coming up with different ideas and is putting pressure on you, and that might happen, then you're in a strong enough position to just be able to ignore it or to be polite. You're actually very good at the moment at avoiding conflict. It's a skill that's been sort of building up over the last few weeks, and if other people are spoiling for a fight, you'll just know exactly how to deal with a problem and to change the subject and perhaps to get people to calm down and to look at things in a different way. And part of that, Capricorn, is at the moment you come over as being a reasonable and mature person, and people do appreciate that. Aquarius, there's starting to be a lot of activity in the sign Taurus, and Taurus is an important sign for you because Taurus, it's a fixed sign. It's at the bottom of your chart. It represents the foundations of who you are and where you came from. And we have a new moon in Taurus this weekend, at the end of the weekend, and this new moon makes a square to Mars and it makes a square to Pluto. So you've got a Mars-Pluto opposition at the moment. It's exact. And this Mars-Pluto opposition affects the main axis of your chart, because you've got Pluto in Aquarius, and you've got Pluto is moving through Aquarius, Mars is moving through Leo, and we've got this new moon squaring both Mars and Pluto. So this is certainly a very dynamic aspect. It can't be trivialized, and you feel that there are certain things you really need to take seriously, and it's important that you always remember who you are. Now, there may be a sense of conflict, and uncertainty over the course of the weekend because of that Mars-Pluto opposition. And it may not be helped by other people. Mars is moving through Leo, your opposite sign. That can indicate difficult people. And opposition Pluto, that's about you trying to be assertive, and it's about you trying to remain in control. And it can be hard work. And there may be moments of uncertainty where you are not quite sure what you should be doing. You want to do what is right. You also want to look after your own interests. You're aware of your own selfishness. You may think that you're perhaps being too selfish or not selfish enough. So you do have these uncertainties. And so what is the answer to the problem? Well, the answer to the problem is Taurus, because the Sun and the Moon are maybe resolving the Mars-Pluto opposition. And the answer is, what is real? What is genuine to you, and what is in accordance with the past? You have a history, and that history makes sense to you. It's quite clear that if you look at the course of your life, it's going in a particular direction. And if something is in accord with this direction, then it should be welcomed. If it's not in accord, then it should be rejected. So that actually makes things easy, or easier, because if there are pressures, you can just compare those pressures with who you are. You make that comparison, and it's obvious. And you don't have to give in to any pressure, because it's all about you making the decisions and you deciding where you feel most comfortable. And if you are under extreme pressure for whatever reason, then you just have to do whatever it takes to make yourself feel safer and more comfortable. And you just have to take the appropriate action. And that's something that you can do in a way that is very effective. And it's not about whether or not other people get upset or complain. You're the one who makes the decisions, and you make the decisions, on the basis of the past. And this new moon that we've got is a very home-orientated new moon. And, you should be thinking about where you live, how you live, your whole domestic environment, and you might get some insights. And some Aquarians might realize that there's something wrong with the way they live. It's not in accordance with the past, or it's become out of accordance. You've lost connection with something. And if you've lost a connection, then now it's time to rediscover that connection and make whatever changes are necessary. It's not about dramatic change for the sake of it. It's actually going back to what you know and trust. And if you can do that and you make your own decisions, then it's a weekend that can be not just reassuring, but you can actually put yourself back on the straight and narrow. And it's not just about the weekend, because this new moon, its influence will persist for the next couple of weeks. So there is some useful and grounding work that can now be done. Pisces, you are feeling quite strong in some respects at the moment, and that's to do with Jupiter. Jupiter continues to be on the Sun-Mars midpoint, because Jupiter, Jupiter is still fairly close to a semi-square with the Sun and a semi-square to Mars. It's not those two semi-squares are not exact, but Jupiter is between the Sun and Mars, and Sun and Mars are very dynamic planets, and so when these planets come together, this is a time Pisces when you're really able to be strong, and if there's anything you don't like or you want to change, then it shouldn't be a problem. Being assertive and getting people to take you seriously, and there's nothing actually that you have to do. And right now you're going to be very good, I think, at resisting pressure. In fact, you're going to be quite good at creating pressure if you so wish. Now, we do have a build up to a new moon this weekend. So we got a new moon in Taurus. So this new moon might be about how you get on with people, not on an emotional level, more about how you're talking to them, what words you use, what is the best way of communicating. And so it's possible, Pisces, that you've been communicating in a way that hasn't been appropriate for the times, or maybe it was appropriate for the times, but things have changed. You now have to be more definite. You don't have to use loads of words. You just have to use carefully chosen words which are very down to earth, and you can then get your message across, and people will understand. And don't forget the people you meet all the time, the people who are around you all the time, the people who you can talk to, you could talk to, because they're always there. That might relate to your neighbours, people you walk past every single day, but you never say a word. It's always worth saying something, and you never know what kind of response you're going to get. And in terms of communication, there may be people you haven't talked to for a long time, maybe a very long time. And with this new moon in Taurus, it might be a time when you should actually consider it. It may not be something you want to do. This new moon, after all, is square Mars and it's square Pluto, and you might feel, no, you don't want to risk anything. But talking to someone you haven't talked to for a long time, it can happen, and it can actually work quite well. And this new moon can be a beginning. For example, it could be members of your family, specifically if you have brothers and sisters. So there could be something to do with brothers and sisters. I mean, so if you have not talked to a brother or sister for a very long time, now might be your chance. Even if you are in constant contact with brothers and sisters, then now with this new moon, you can make more of those contacts. Maybe you can find new things in common with your siblings. I mean, that might not be appropriate. You might not have any siblings, but I thought I just had to, make that suggestion, because astrologically, we do see evidence there. Though with the Sun and the Moon square Mars, square Pluto, I'm not saying that relations with siblings are necessarily going to be completely easy, but this is a new moon. This is something that can develop, over the next couple of weeks. And aside from that, Venus is still moving through Pisces, but Venus is starting to move out of the sign. Next week Venus moves into Aries. And with Venus moving through Pisces, Venus is a planet of relationships, and it is possible that someone is moving away from you, with that Venus moving out of Pisces. And when Venus moves into Aries, they might be very difficult to get in touch with. So if there's someone who you are currently in contact with, but you can see them starting to distance themselves from you, and you feel there's something that needs to be said that you'd like to say, then maybe you should act sooner rather than later. I mean, when does Venus move? Venus moves into Aries, let me tell you to be more precise, on the 30th. So that would be on sort of Wednesday. So, if you don't say anything and you just assume that they'll be in touch with you and you leave it beyond Wednesday, you might have missed your chance. So there may be something you need to finish off over the next few days while Venus is in Pisces. And that is the last remnant of the Pisces season. It's the last inner planet to be in Pisces, and so you miss that chance, then Venus won't be in Pisces again, well, for a very long time. So those are a few thoughts about this weekend. I don't think, Pisces, that this weekend need be dramatic. I think for some of the 12 signs it's going to be a lot more dramatic. So I don't think that you should be worried by this weekend, and I think that the emphasis really should be on communication, particularly communication with people who you have fallen out with, or perhaps haven't been in contact with for some time, or communication with people who might be on the point of quitting the scene. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and it's now I Ching time. So let's see what is going on with the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 40, which is deliverance. So if we've got 40, then that indicates that there's something you're trying to escape from. That's what it's about. There's a problem. You're not happy about this problem. And deliverance means that the problem can be resolved, or not even resolved, actually. You can escape from it, because that's what deliverance is about. You have a difficult situation and you have a chance to get out of it, and if you don't take that chance, then you've lost it and you're stuck, and things can only get worse. So if you are involved in something that you're not happy about, it could be an agreement, a promise, or just people around you that are bothering you, or you're temporarily in a place you don't like being, then think about the possibility that you can just turn your back and leave, and that's all there is to it. So do not think that you are stuck, because I don't think that you are. Now, there is a moving line, and this moving line is the fifth line. And with the fifth line moving, it certainly indicates that you have a chance to escape and to change things. And the question is, what does this actually mean? And different versions of the I Ching give different interpretations. Now, one way of looking at this fifth line is to say that the fifth line represents inferior people. The I Ching does like to talk about inferior people. I mean, they're inferior from your perspective, your subjective perspective, your subjective perspective. It doesn't mean that they are really inferior. You have to look at this in a sort of a symbolic way. So it could be that you have a chance to distance yourself from inferior people. Some of you may find that you are crowded out by people you don't respect, you don't like their priorities, you don't like what they're suggesting, they're in your way, they're taking up your time, and you just want to be shot of them. In which case, no problem, that can be done. There is another way of looking at it, and it might be about the kind of example you are setting. I mean, it could, for example, be that it's not just you that needs to escape from something, but a lot of other people do. And they're stuck. They can't think straight. And you're the one that gets it. And you get it. And you start making moves and you start to realize that you're setting an example. And so people watch your actions. They listen to what you say. And by setting a good example, people follow you. And so it's possible that you can not just deliver yourself from a danger, but you can maybe deliver a lot of other people as well, because they'll follow your example, they'll maybe listen to your advice. Maybe you get something that other people don't get, and you get it, and you transmit it, and they listen, and they accept, and and in the end, they follow your lead. A fifth line moving, that means we move to a different hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 47, which is oppression. Now that doesn't sound too good, but if we actually look at what it actually means, is we've got a lot on our plate. That's why we might feel oppressed. We have got something that we really have to deal with, we have to carry. And it may relate to that previous hexagram. You know, if we're trying to escape from something, particularly if other people are following us or listening to us, you know, that does give us a big responsibility. Other people who should be responsible are not living up to their responsibility, so it's all down to us. And we have to make sure everything happens. We have to make sure that everyone is safe. And it's really tough. But the I Ching tells us that we can do it. We'll get there. And so oppression is not as bad as it looks. It just means that we've got a lot of responsibility. And I think that we will bear that responsibility with good humour, and we will be able to see things to a successful, or at least satisfactory, conclusion. And now it's time to look at the astrology. And you know, this weekend is really quite busy. It's because of that new moon, and it's also because of that Mars opposition Pluto. And it's actually quite difficult to separate the two out, to say that, oh, we should look at the Mars-Pluto opposition and then look at the new moon. I don't think that is really possible. So let's start looking. Let's start by looking at the new moon. So here's the new moon that takes place over the weekend. So there it is. Happens on Sunday, April the 27th, 2025. I make it 8:31 p.m. London time, and this new moon is, of course, not just something that happens on Sunday and that's the end of it. New moons can last a long time. They can certainly last a couple of weeks. And this new moon is in Taurus. It's a 747 Taurus, and so there's a Taurus new moon every single year. Sometimes there could be two Taurus new moons if you had a new moon right at the beginning of Taurus and right at the end of Taurus, but not in this case. And this new moon, it represents a new beginning. And as I always say with new moons, it's about something just starting. To begin with a new moon, everything is dark. You can't see the moon. You don't have to announce your intentions with this new moon. Now, this new moon is square a Mars-Pluto opposition. So we've got a Mars-Pluto opposition over the weekend, and we've got a new moon, and they come together by square. It's not an exact square, but I think it's good enough, or difficult enough. And so I think that this new moon for the world is possibly not going to be particularly easy. It's in fixed signs. You've got the Sun and the Moon in Taurus, fixed signs. You've got squaring Mars in Leo, fixed sign. Squaring Pluto in Aquarius, a fixed sign. And to make matters even more difficult, we've got true Black Moon Lilith at 5 degrees 30 Scorpio. So you could say that there is a grand cross if you throw Black Moon Lilith into the equation. So it really does feel that there is a huge amount of pressure, and perhaps we're seeing pressure everywhere. We're seeing pressure, in the economy. We're seeing pressure in individual countries. Political systems are under pressure. And additionally, we've got conflicts. We've got Ukraine. We've got Gaza. We now have a new area of conflict, or potential area of conflict, and that's in India. And I'll be talking about India and Pakistan a bit later. I think I did have some commenters from Pakistan who were sort of saying, why do you talk too much about India and you don't talk about Pakistan? Well, I'm going to try to talk about Pakistan a little bit in this video. And so it is, you can see, really a rather difficult new moon because it's linked with that Mars-Pluto, and it just feels that something has to give. It just can't go on like this forever. Something has to blow, and whatever we're doing, we don't have to think about big conflicts like Ukraine or Gaza. We can think about our own lives, our own communities, and pressure is building. Even looking at the city where I'm living, I can feel the pressure here. You can see what's happening in the city council and the public comments that people are making, and what's going on in the city I'm living in. Well, they're talking about tax and giving tax breaks to developers and for particular projects or for particular areas, and there's resistance to that. But developers, they do get a lot of tax breaks, and the development is seen as being something good for its own sake by the city. But it's just more pressure, and people in the city are obviously not happy about that. So wherever you are, there's pressure, and if you do feel pressure, you shouldn't feel that you are being uniquely singled out. Now, when you've got this new moon, one way of looking at it is, well, you need to look at it in terms of different places. So this new moon is set for London, and there are things to be said about the London new moon. But there are also things to be said about this new moon generically. So if we set up a 90-degree dial for this new moon, and we see what midpoints it's on, it's all rather unsatisfactory, because the main midpoint that this new moon, if we discount the ascendant, because the ascendant is particular to the London location, if we discount that, we see that this planet Admetos, this hypothetical planet Admetos, is on the, well, there's the Admetos Mercury. The new moon is on the Admetos Mercury, the Admetos Hades, and the Admetos Cupido midpoint. The Admetos Mercury midpoint is particularly strong, and Mercury is obviously a planet of communication, and Admetos is about delay, things not necessarily working out, things being a bit slow. And if you think about it, in the world at the moment, there's a lot of communication that people are trying to move forward with. For example, Trump trying to negotiate with Russia and the Ukraine. You've now got a new area of conflict in India, between India and Pakistan, with this recent terrorist attack. And you've always got something to worry about in Gaza. And so people may be trying their hardest to come to a deal, to negotiate, but you have new moon on the Cupid, on the Mercury Hades midpoint, or aspecting the Mercury Hades midpoint. How are you going to actually reach any conclusions here? I mean, that really could be really difficult. So if you look, for example, at what Alfred Witter says in his Rules of Planetary Pictures about the Mercury Admetos midpoint, he says serious or limited thinking, perseverance in thinking, profound mind, deep concentration of thoughts, thoughts of death, grief, suspended, standstill, end of emotion, negotiations which are a dead issue. And I think that kind of sums up some of the negotiations that Trump is having with Putin and with Moscow. And as far as the Sun on the Mercury Admetos midpoint, which maybe is a bit more personal, a little exercise to end emotion, the body at a standstill, no physical perseverance, to be driven in a vehicle, sedentary mode of life, and again, with the moon on the Mercury Admetos midpoint, persons with sedentary life. Not much movement there. And that relates to Admetos and the fact that it does slow things down. So I don't think we're going to see much in the way of resolution with this new moon. So then there is the issue of the astrocartography. So if we look at the map, these are these are all the places where the new moon is. Where the new moon is on the descendant, and you can see that this goes right through UK. So the UK could be influenced by this, and if we take this further out, if we look at the position of the Mars-Pluto conjunction at the time of the new moon, it's right across the ascendant, going through northern India, through Delhi, and additionally the new moon is on the IC, going through Karachi. Now, Karachi is not actually the capital of Pakistan; it's Islamabad. It doesn't go through the IC on Islamabad, because Karachi is an important city. It used to be the capital of India, of Pakistan. Independence it was, and so there's some influence here on the Indian subcontinent, and possibly something going on through in terms of Ukraine. So let's look at those charts to see how the new moon might be impacting the places I've just talked about. So I set this chart up for London as, I don't know, out of convenience. I mean, one reason I set it up for London is it's because it's easy. The ephemeris I use uses Greenwich Mean Time, so I just add an hour, and that's the time of the new moon, because we've got summertime in the UK. So this new moon is quite close to the United Kingdom, to the London descendant, and that might be suggestive of enemies. And additionally, Uranus is on the seventh house cusp. Sorry, it's not on the seventh house cusp, it's in the seventh house, but Uranus is square the midheaven. So the midheaven represents the government, and there may be shocks to the government in the UK. Now, we do have elections on next week, on May the 1st. There are a few local council elections. There were going to be more, but the government found a way of cancelling the elections. I mean, it cancelled the elections because they were having administrative changes. They were rationalising local government and removing a tier of government, and so as a result of that, they were able to cancel elections. So these elections would not be as dramatic as they would usually be, but there are going to be a fair amount of local elections. Plus, there is a by-election in, I think, Runcorn, which is a northern seat, which is a Labour seat, but the MP had to stand down. I think he hit someone, and so they had to have a by-election, and there is a real chance that Reform will win this. So there's a lot of pressure here for the British government, and there's a lot of pressure here for Britain in general, I think, with this new moon. And one thing about the 90-degree dial, sorry if you're not in the UK and you don't find this especially interesting, but one thing I did notice about the new moon, if you set this for Westminster and the midpoints, is that the Mars-Pluto opposition, which on a 90-degree dial is a conjunction, is the midpoint between the Mars ascendant and Pluto ascendant is on the Sun-Moon. So the Sun-Moon the new moon brings together the Mars-Pluto conjunction and the ascendant. So that's not really very easy if you're in the UK, and that could suggest times are already troubled. So things are so difficult in the UK that it could just be more of the same. So those are a few sort of comments about the UK. And if we look at other places, I mean, here's the new moon set for Washington D.C., capital of the US. I'm just showing you this because it's an important. The United States is an important country, so we should see what this new moon looks like from an American perspective. I don't think that this new moon is especially dramatic. I don't see anything massively important going on here. The new moon it's in the 9th house. That may suggest that the emphasis continues to be on foreign affairs. 9th house. It could be about the Supreme Court, and if you're a supporter of Trump, you're thinking, oh well, the courts are trying to slow Trump down, and so it might have a legalistic aspect, this new moon for Washington. But I don't think I would read too much into it. And if we set it for Kiev, I don't think that this is massively dramatic. The Venus is conjunct the IC. You could say that you've got Skeet, the fixed star connected with accidents and disasters, is on the IC. Saturn is on the IC. South Node is on the midheaven. That might say something about Zelensky. Remembering that he has just had a Mars return. I mean, his Mars is at we shouldn't. One thing about Zelensky that we shouldn't forget is that Mars is at 4 degrees 9 Leo. So next week he's going to have Mars conjunct his Sun, because he's got his Sun at 5 degrees Aquarius. He's got Sun-Venus conjunction at 5 degrees Aquarius. So he will have Mars conjunct his Sun. So that's something that he should perhaps be considering. But South Node is on the midheaven. I don't think that does a great deal for Ukraine's reputation. But again, that's not a chart that I think I would necessarily read too much into. Now, if we set the new moon for Delhi, capital of India, then it is important. I mean, Delhi is a city that is really hit by this new moon. The new moon, the new moon itself is not on an angle, but at the time of the new moon, at the exact time of the new moon, Pluto is on the ascendant, Mars is on the descendant. So from an Indian perspective, it is about the enemy. Of course, the enemy is always Pakistan, and so it really is a country that is trying to look after its own interests. And I think that we could see more events. This attack in Kashmir its impact has not gone away. And I'll be coming back to India and Pakistan in a moment. And we could also set that new moon for Islamabad, which is the capital of Pakistan, and it's not so dramatic. The midheaven is on the moon Uranus midheaven, and Mars is close to the seventh house cusp. I mean, it's roughly in the same part of the world, so you will have in the Indian subcontinent the Mars-Pluto opposition quite close to the ascendant, not as intense. I mean, this is perhaps a reminder about how this disagreement between India and Pakistan is working out. Pakistan takes the view, it had nothing to do with it. It's India's problem, even though 2 Pakistani nationals were involved in the attack. It's India's problem, but obviously India is taking it very seriously. Now, before I looked at India and Pakistan, I just wanted to consider a few people who might be impacted by the Mars-Pluto opposition and by the Sun-Moon conjunction. So starting with the Mars-Pluto opposition, one person who could be influenced is General Siersky. So he is the head of the Ukrainian armed forces. He was originally born in Russia, so he's an example of a Russian who has now become part of the Ukrainian armed forces. This just reminds us of these links between Ukraine and Pakistan, between Ukraine and Russia. And Siersky was born on July the 26th, 1965. And so his sun, I don't have his time of birth, his sun is at around 3 degrees Leo. So the Mars-Pluto opposition is directly on his sun, and he's in sort of the middle of fighting this war. And so this Mars-Pluto opposition could actually put him under a huge amount of pressure. And having Mars on his sun, what's he going to try to do? How's he going to try to resolve the problem? And that may say something about what happens on the battlefield and the kind of pressure he's put under. It could be that Mars conjunct the Sun, he feels a great inclination to take some kind of offensive action. The opposition Pluto, he may feel he has to resolve something by doing something different in a military sense. And someone else affected by the Mars-Pluto opposition, someone completely different, is Michelle Obama. Again, don't have a time for Michelle Obama. And Michelle Obama has her Mars at 3 degrees Aquarius. So the Mars-Saturn opposition is certainly hitting her Mars. Does that say something about her relationship with her husband? And we might get some news about that. And she's been interviewed, and she seems to have been showing some irritation with her husband, and so maybe something is happening behind closed doors with that Mars Mars opposition Pluto hitting her Mars. And as far as the new moon is concerned, the European Union could be impacted by this new moon. If we take the time that the Maastricht came into being, the Treaty of Maastricht, November the 1st, 1993, and then the Sun was at 8:32 Scorpio. So the new moon is opposition the EU's Sun. And so this new moon may be about yet another new challenge that the EU has to deal with, and it has been under a great deal of pressure recently. And Also, Russia. If we take this as a chart of Russia, this new moon is on Russia's midheaven. And so the new moon may say something about what Russia is planning on doing, how it deals with its negotiations, how it deals with the war. It may be a time that Russia has to do something that it hasn't done before, but it certainly gives extra prominence to Russia and the Russian government. Of course, the midheaven, you could say, is the president, and so there might be an announcement or some kind of action, and it probably has something to do with the way the war is conducted. That new moon, by the way, is square Russia's Chiron and square its Saturn. So Saturn is, you could say, even though it's got us, is that in the seventh? You could say it's in the sixth, but so that new moon impacts Russia in terms of people. George Galloway, the former Labour MP, now he was a Respect MP. He has a podcast. George Galloway, his midheaven is at 826 midheaven. His midheaven is at 826 Taurus, so the new moon may say something about him and his career and his podcasting career, his YouTube career. So that might be a new direction for George Galloway. And finally, there is King Abdullah, King of Jordan. His IC is 7 degrees 56 Taurus. So I would have thought the new moon on your IC is probably a little more dangerous than having a new moon on your midheaven. I mean, occasionally I see something dangerous happening in King Abdullah's chart, and I say something about it, and nothing happens. So it's quite possible that nothing will happen. But this new moon is actually hitting some important planets in his chart. He was born at the beginning of 1962, so he has a lot of planets in Aquarius. He's got Saturn, Sun, Venus in Aquarius. Mars will be making an opposition to those aspects, and Mars is in his 7th house. That could be about his enemies. So this might be a time where King Abdullah has to be a bit careful, perhaps. And that new moon on his IC may say something about his country, but I don't really know enough about Jordan to really suggest how that could be. But there are always issues in Jordan. You've got Gaza and the Middle East, and then there is the question of India and Pakistan, and so the charts for India and Pakistan are very close to one another because they got independence pretty much at the same time. So here's the chart for India, and India does have its ascendant at 0 degrees Gemini. So that means that quite soon Uranus is going to be on India's ascendant. There's its born at noon, freedom at midnight and all that kind of thing, on August 15th, 1947. So Uranus will be crossing India's ascendant in June. Is that June? No, sorry, July. So that's not immediately going to be happening, but it's certainly something that we absolutely have to be aware of. And, additionally, India has got a lot of planets in Leo, of course, so has Pakistan. And so Mercury, Pluto, Saturn. So Mercury. So when Mars crosses India's Mercury, and this new moon is square India's Mercury, it will also be crossing Pakistan's Mercury because they got independence pretty much at the same time. So these two planets are having, these two countries, India and Pakistan, are trying to work out how to deal with this terrorist attack. It's India that is the offended country. It is a country that feels that its borders have been infringed, that Pakistan has been out of order, and communications are not working well, and Mars is moving towards a conjunction of both of their Mercuries, and then it will, and they've got Mercury conjunct Pluto. So you can see that it could really be something of a deadlock situation. And Neptune is in Aries, so Neptune is square India's Mars. It's also square Pakistan's Mars, and you're dealing with two countries which have got huge militaries, and both of which have nuclear arsenals. So that is maybe something that one should be a little bit concerned about. Now here is Pakistan's chart. There are a few differences. I've gone for August the 14th, 1947, 11:59 p.m. Set for Karachi. That was the capital of Pakistan at the time of its independence. And you can see that, there's Mercury, of course. It's at 26, it's at 6 Leo, like India. And this, the midheaven. So if that time is right, that means that Pluto is exactly on Pakistan's midheaven and Mars is exactly on its IC. So the Mars-Pluto opposition is hitting Pakistan in really, really quite a big way. So I think that this conflict, or this brewing conflict between India and Pakistan is just not going to resolve very quickly. And there are some more charts I want to look at. I'm kind of going on a bit here, but I briefly looked at the chart of the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif. I don't have his time of birth, and I looked at his chart, and to be honest, I did say that I don't have anything useful to say about it, but Shehbaz Sharif, as Prime Minister of Pakistan, has a Mars-Pluto conjunction in his chart. So there it is. And the potential of that Mars-Pluto conjunction in Scorpio is violent. It's good he's got Mars-Pluto conjunction in terms of him looking after himself. But, now he's Prime Minister of Pakistan. Mars-Pluto conjunction, this new moon is opposition his Mars-Pluto conjunction. Further, he's got the Mars-Pluto opposition is square that Mars-Pluto conjunction. So the whole potential of his Mars-Pluto conjunction is being manifested and brought out into the open by the new moon and the Mars-Pluto opposition we have this weekend. And it's not going to get any easier, and he's going to have Mars square Mars over the next few days. And another chart that we might want to look at is the chart when Jammu and Kashmir became a union territory. And so here's the chart of them becoming union territory. And so the sun this happened on October the 31st, 2019, with the sun at 7:32 Scorpio. So this new moon is opposition the Kashmir Union Territory's sun. So that really stirs things up. Plus, Uranus was at 4 degrees Taurus, so the Mars-Pluto opposition is square Uranus, is square the Kashmir Union Territory's Uranus. So this is, this is not looking great, is it? And finally, there is this treaty, which was the treaty which was signed on in 1960, which is the Indus Waters Treaty. So the Indus Waters Treaty is an agreement between India and Pakistan regarding cooperation in terms of how the Indus is dealt with. And I mean, I don't really know much about the subject, but I've seen the Indus when I was in Kashmir, in the Indian side of Kashmir. This huge river, and it's obviously very important for Pakistan's economy, and there's always a water issue at the moment. And so, as far as the Indians are concerned, they have the ability to make things very difficult for Pakistan through messing with the Indus and through ending this treaty, which is what they have done. So this treaty was signed on September the 19th, 1960 in Karachi. I don't know what time it was signed. And at the time of the signature, Mars was opposition Jupiter, and there was a T-square. So Sun was square Jupiter and square Mars. And so this treaty has come to an end. And it came to an end as Saturn was hitting this T-square. So if you for example, if you look at the Pahalgam, this is the third quarter moon before the attack. But if we hold on, let me just get the Pahalgam out. So if you look at the chart of the Pahalgam attack here, and you compare it with the Indus Waters Treaty, let's just do the two. So there's a Pahalgam, and then the Indus Waters Treaty. So at the time of the attack, sorry, I got it the other way around. At the time of attack, Saturn was at 2657 Pisces. So it was just opposition the Sun of the Indus Waters Treaty. So Saturn was really hitting the Mars-Jupiter opposition and the Sun on the T, and so the Indus Waters Treaty has come to an end, and that seems to be related to Saturn. So yeah, there's a lot going on between India and Pakistan, and I don't think we're going to see any quick resolution. And the situation does look dangerous, and it's just one more area of conflict for the world to worry about. So anyway, sorry to have gone on for so long. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.